I'm Truman the Grey Merchant, and this is a video on Magic the Gathering's long history of lost media. That is, products that were announced and or had significant work put into them, only to be cancelled or made inaccessible. The inaccessible category is more nebulous, as, for example, there are many Magic novels that are out of print. However, since most of them can be bought for cheap and or easily found online, I don't consider them lost. Similarly, most old Magic video games can't be bought firsthand, but can still be played if you already own a digital copy and or are available physically and or have Brazen Coalition copies out there. We'll discuss the exceptions as we encounter them. Like and subscribe. Netflix. The animated Netflix series gets its own category because I have no idea what's going on there. 2 years ago, I did a video on the history of Magic's movie and TV attempts, which included the status of the Netflix show up to that point. I hope the show's good, and also that it comes out. There have been so many false starts in adapting this franchise. I am paranoid that there's going to be an announcement that's cancelled the day after I post this. To briefly recap, it was announced in 2019 with the Russo brothers at the helm, production by Octopi, and animation by Bardell Entertainment. In 2021, it was reported that the creative team had departed over differences in vision. Direction was taken over by Jeff Klein, with animation by Snowball Studios, and voice work by Brandon Routh. A release date of the back half of 2022 was given. That clearly did not happen. Also that it comes out. For a long time, there was mostly silence. The Wizard CEO Chris Cox and Mark Rosewater both made statements that the show was still in development. In September 2024, Ralph said, "Apparently it's not happening, but call the series Duskmourn's Black-White Archetype because it's back from the dead, allegedly." As just 10 days later, it was announced that a new version of the show was in the works, led by Terry Matalas. A prequel novel to the series was also announced, written by experienced Magic author Django Wexler. It would show the Netflix continuity's versions of Jace and Gideon meet for the first time. Even if the show does end up coming out, the apparent retool puts the book status in question. Released and removed. To begin the tier, we have an entry that is both one of the oldest and one of the most recent various Magic websites and articles. Most recently, a migration of the Magic website last year resulted in the loss of countless articles. Getting real sick of your attitude, Fibblethorpe. Thankfully, many, though currently not all, of these articles are available on the Internet Archive. I personally use the DK extension, which redirects you to an accessible version of the page if one exists. Even before the migration, various mini-sites and other associated websites were retired over the years. Again, some, but not all, of this content is available on the Internet Archive. With all the archived content, images and other features are often missing. The Internet Archive actually went down as I was making this video. Hopefully it will come back soon, or this lost media list will get a lot longer. Next, we have a trio of associated video games. They were all described in 2020 as part of Wizards of the Coast's year of digital expansion, and all were taken down because they didn't attract enough players. As they all contained online elements, the server shutdowns means they are no longer possible to fully run, and certain planned features were never added in the first place. Magic Spellslingers was a mobile game that existed between 2022 and 2024. It offered simplified MTG-inspired gameplay and a cartoonified cast of planeswalkers and legendary creatures. It was announced as the first social collectible card game designed for the mobile generation, a statement as embarrassing as it is meaningless. Legends was... well, there have been a lot of things called Legends, but I'm specifically talking about the failed video game. Magic Legends was a free-to-play online role-playing game intended for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. Only the PC version reached open beta in 2021. After 4 months, its cancellation was announced, which went through after another 4 months. I'll save a longer description for a later video focused on Magic's video game history, but to quickly summarize, you played as a planeswalker traversing the multiverse, and the gameplay was similar to Diablo. There were a range of recognizable locations, characters, and card references. Mana Strike was a mobile tower rush game in the vein of Clash Royale. It launched in 2020 and was shut down after a year. The framing device was that matches were simulations of battling planeswalkers in the meditation realm. This led to what-if concepts, most famously Robot Gideon. Unfortunately, by all accounts, these games were bland and derivative, and they never managed to capture much of an audience. Magic the Gathering Toolbox was Magic's original companion app, existing for only 2/3 of Innistrad block before being pulled. It was pretty comprehensive for a 2012 app, including a life tracker, deck builder, event listings, player manager, card database, news, and a store locator. There's a site claiming to host emulations of the app, but it forces you to download an extension to access the page, and I'm simply not going to do that. Summer Magic is at the bottom of this tier because its status as released is debatable. It serves as a bizarre case of an entire print run being recalled. This summer 1994 release, codenamed Edgar, was meant to be a fixed version of Revised Edition, with corrected colors and the removal of satanic imagery. However, it had many printing issues of its own, leading to the recall and destruction of the run. An unknown number of Summer Magic cards made it out into the world by accident, released and lost. This category is for old Magic stuff that is probably out there, but isn't well documented online. The Magic Libraries site is the best catalog of this kind of stuff around, and even it has some gaps. Examples of missing merchandise include calendars, magnets, and phone cards. There's also obscure packaging and advertising material, such as the booster packs included with some versions of the Duelist magazine. Check your closets and garages and start scanning, people. Announced and cancelled. Magic Duels. It wasn't Arena, or MTGO, or even Duels with Planeswalkers. It was a digital version of Magic that actually did come out in 2015. However, the PlayStation 4 port that was supposed to release later that same year was indefinitely delayed in 2016. It probably would have been similar to the Xbox One version, but on a PlayStation. Chandra, Trials of Alara, was a 4-part comic arc that was supposed to release in 2019. It was a sequel to the Chandra comic of the previous year, which probably didn't meet expectations. Trials of Alara featured a new creative team of writer James Asmus and artist Eric Koda. IDW announced it with descriptions and rough covers of all 4 issues. The series description begins, Pyromancer Chandra Nalaar's newest adventure will test her like never before, but she doesn't have to do it alone, thanks to fellow planeswalker Jace Balaran. On the formerly fractured plane of Alara, Chandra and Jace must protect a village in grave peril. The comic run was delayed for a few months before eventually being cancelled. While making my video on the first Chandra comic, I exchanged emails with someone who worked on Trials of Alara. They described a tumultuous behind-the-scenes situation. Perhaps that contributed to the cancellation as well. Given the Magic comic license has since changed twice, I very much doubt this will ever be released officially. In only 15 months, between 1995 and 6, Acclaim Comics published an impressive 35 issues of Magic comics through their Armada print. However, the line abruptly ceased due to flagging sales, according to their editor. This left 4 announced issues unpublished. The first issue, Alliances, ties into the set of the same name and centers on the relationship of Kesa and Jahul Carthalion. Walker of Night continues the story of Lashrak. Prelude to War and Planeswalker War star Jared Carthalion, alongside over a dozen other Planeswalkers. This crossover of many returning characters would have served as a conclusion to various story arcs, making its cancellation especially disappointing. The concept was also intended to be explored in video game form. Armageddon was an arcade game that, in addition to destroying all lands, would have represented Planeswalker Duels. It was a 2-player game that mixed strategy and fighting game mechanics. Players chose between 5 wizards, 1 for each color, with corresponding abilities. The museum of the game states that gameplay can be particularly difficult. Apparently only 4 or 5 machines were produced, released between 1996 and 7. Due to the division handling them going out of business. Various sites claim to host an emulation of the game, but no one seems to be able to get them to actually work, making the game unplayable to all but a handful of physical game owners. Magic the Gathering Portal was a companion app announced in 2018 as coming out later that year, even appearing on ad cards and packs. It was planned to include tournament management, a card and rules database, life trackers, customizable Magic news, friend lists, and tutorials. It was delayed before eventually being cancelled, and replaced by the companion app that we all know and tolerate. Companion's digital product manager, Bill Stark, tactfully said, the Portal team did an awesome job on answering a lot of the questions we needed to understand about building a great companion app, but in the end, the actual product from that effort fell short of where we needed to be for the players. Learning from Portal, Companion is more modest in its ambitions, foregoing the customizable magic news, friend lists, and tutorials. The Curse of the Chain Veil, a Planeswalker novel, is a cancelled novel by John Volenholt that was supposed to come out in 2010, as demonstrated by the "you wouldn't steal a car"-ass graphic design of its cover. It would have been the third entry in the A Planeswalker novel series, a run of novels of mixed reception centered on different planeswalkers. Curse of the Chain Veil would star Liliana Vess, and also featured Garrick, Nicol Bolas, and Jace. In a 2012 forum post, former creative director Brady Damermuth alluded to the reason for the novel's cancellation, stating, "Only one book differed so sharply from our expectation that we elected not to publish it. It was apparently finished, so perhaps it will be unofficially released someday," leading to an intense discussion of canonicity not seen since Test of Metal. Issue 5 of the Dak Fadian comic Magic the Gathering Theros ends on a massive cliffhanger, with Dak descending into the underworld to face Ashiok. The story promises that the comic will be continued, but it was not to be, though War of the Spark, Ravnica would end up providing a handful of details. I did an hour-long retrospective on Dak if you'd like to learn more about his character and story. A Magic film by Universal was announced in 2008, and a Magic film by Fox was announced in 2014. Neither came out, obviously. Again, see my movie video for more context. Never even announced. The tentatively titled Unglued 2, the obligatory sequel, is one of the most complete cancelled sets in the history of Magic, with all of the art and most of the design finished. The original Silverboard set, Unglued, was initially very popular, leading to a sequel quickly being greenlit for 1999. However, as Wizards didn't yet know how to handle supplemental sets, Unglued was overprinted, ultimately leading to a loss and resulting in its sequel being cancelled. Some of the art and designs would end up being used in 2004's Unhinged. Much, but not all, of the unused content has been shared by Mark Rosewater over the years. Mechanically, poison was a major theme, while animated vegetables served as the main flavorful motif. Most ambitiously, the set included scratch-off cards, and considered including bubblegum in packs. The set featured voting cards, influencing the later conspiracy mechanic. Other ideas that inspired Black Border were split cards and color matter designs that were later included in Invasion. Art was also reused for Arena League promotional cards. All in all, it was quite impactful for a set that never saw the light of day. The Outlaws of Thunder Junction Epilogue Booster is another example of an essentially finished set being cancelled. After the dramatically negative reaction to March of the Machine: The Aftermath, the Epilogue Booster concept was retired, but not before a 50-card OTJ epilogue set had been produced. Of those 50 cards, Chase Reawakened was put in the main set, and 30 other cards became the Big Score, a bonus sheet collection that showed up in regular packs. Similarly, Ixalan Block's planned Masterpiece series was cancelled after art had already been produced, as R&D realized a Masterpiece series for every set was unsustainable. The overall theme for the set would have been exploration. The card frame design created for the series ended up being used on the dual face cards of the main set. At least 10 cards from other sets have been theorized to use art originally commissioned for the Masterpiece series. Salad was the code name of a planned 2018 Dominaria small set that was cancelled after the transition from the 2-block paradigm to the 3-and-1 model. Some elements were given to the main set, most notably having a legendary creature in every pack. The only other major feature we know about was Knight Typal, some of which ended up in Throne of Eldraine. Similarly, Cookies was the planned 2019 War of the Spark small set. Little is known about it. The original Weatherlight Saga pitch by Mark Rosewater and Michael Ryan differed from the final execution, after control was taken away from the pair. Since every Magic product goes through changes during development, it wouldn't be feasible to include every little change in a mechanic, story, or set on this list. However, I think the original Weatherlight Saga pitch is important enough in terms of its impact and notability to be included. Mark has shared an outline of the differences. They include Krovax remaining good, Miri surviving, and Volrath disguising himself as Tonrath to kill Stark. After leaving Mercadia, the Weatherlight is transported 50 years into the future, arriving in a Dominaria that has already been taken over by the Phyrexians. The leader of the resistance is an elderly Urtai, who directs them to find an artifact known as the Hourglass Pendant. Some references to the original plan were included in earlier story material, such as the pendant and a character implied to be the future Urtai. Encyclopedia Dominia was to be a coffee table book-sized encyclopedia of magic lore. Magic artist and continuity manager Pete Venters worked alongside RPG writer John Tynes on the project, which aimed to consolidate the story content of Magic's first few years. It would have featured a fully illustrated comic book introduction. Venters was able to share some of the art he created for the project. While the book never materialized, the name and much of the content ended up being used as a website. The Encyclopedia was closely connected to a planned RPG from the same era. The game ended up being cancelled when Wizard shut down its RPG line in 1995, but its influence is felt to this day. Most notably, Pete Venters arranged the Dominarian global map in part based on the layout of the game. The RPG team took the locations of the set and story material of the day and arranged them by difficulty. The domains were the starter area, followed by Jamora and Shiv, then ending with Terisier and Sarpadia. The continents were separated by vast oceans to ensure players didn't accidentally end up in a dangerous place too early. This arrangement can still be seen on modern-day maps of Dominaria. Terisier also had its design improved, making it less potato-like. This map work is also the reason Dominaria is merely 2.5 times the size of Earth instead of 30. I would not be surprised if there was a Dominaria-themed D&D book someday. 2020's Theros Beyond Death was an outlier among modern sets with a specific setting and that didn't have story content in the form of a novel or web fiction. Instead, only a brief story summary and some card descriptions were released. However, a more completed story apparently did exist. In the words of franchise creative director Jeremy Jarvis, the blowback from Forsaken illuminated that we needed a better validation strategy, not only for issues of representation, but for narrative content in general. So we made the hard call to delay Theros Beyond Death fiction until we could create a new vetting process. He went on to say, "We will also find the correct time and channel to release the Theros Beyond Death fiction. Maybe it will be part of an anthology, or direct to Audible, or as a graphic novel. It's been 4 years, and that did not end up happening. I don't think it will at this point. With how tight the creative budget is, I just don't see them justifying finalizing and releasing the story of a set from half a decade ago." Acclaim's previously mentioned Planeswalker War storyline managed to get cancelled in 3 different forms, like the average YouTuber. Rise of the Mana Wraith would have been a PC role-playing game following up on the Planeswalker War story. Possibly. The only source I can find is an MTG wiki page created a couple of weeks ago, and the citation it provides doesn't actually mention Rise of the Mana Wraith, so I'm taking this whole concept with a grain of salt. According to the wiki page, the game would have taken place 7 years after the Planeswalker War. In post-apocalyptic Corondor, Jared Carthalion works to heal the land, encountering various returning characters along the way. According to Multiverse in Review, additional planned but unannounced Armada comics include a conclusion to the ongoing Antiquity series and stories based on The Dark, Mirage, Hurling Minotaur, and Merfolk, respectively. This is every official Magic release that has been cancelled or rendered inaccessible, to my knowledge. But I'm sure I missed things. Thank you to everyone who has put work into preserving this information, such as the Internet Archive, MTG Wiki, the Magic Libraries, and Multiverse in Review. All sources I used are linked below. It's interesting comparing all these entries and seeing recurring themes, such as licensing is hard, sets have to make money, and the transient nature of digital media. We can also see that much of this media ended up being reused, or the base concept was released in a new form, which is good. Which entries that we haven't seen would you most like to? For me, I'd have to go with the arcade machine, because that would be really cool. I would also love a modern-day Magic encyclopedia. Art books are neat, but I long for the written word too. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, consider watching my video on illegal Magic sets. Thank you to all my patrons. You can support this channel through Patreon and YouTube memberships. Bye!